We are tackling a 12-team PPR mock draft today. We do a lot of mock drafts on, Underdog. We do a lot of mock drafts on, from Dynasty perspective on Sleeper. We don't tackle a ton of redraft mock drafts for those of you guys that have your home leagues coming up. I'm sure you guys are just kind of getting back to the scene, starting to tune into training camp. The preseason starts pretty much like next weekend. So we figured we'd give you guys an idea of what the Sleeper ADP is looking like and some of the value pockets that we're targeting, as well as some, team construction and roster construction. So we're not going to waste any time. Danny, how you doing? I'm going to randomize the draft order, and then we're going to get right into this. We're no intro. We're just going right away.
Doing well. We're a day or two from when we're recording this away from August. August is the ramp-up period. A lot of you guys are doing a lot of your off-season research. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to come back to a lot of the videos we're going to be putting up. A lot of content on the way, but we're getting ready for home leagues. We're getting ready for those redraft-style leagues. The leagues you pull up to your buddy's place, you bring some beers, and you just roast whoever has the worst pick of the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. I did actually randomize the draft order just now, and it moved me down one pick, and it didn't move you at all. So we're going to go from the 5 spot and the 8 spot here, and we're going to tackle this thing. Like I said, we're going to see kind of how the board develops. Hopefully, like, something stupid doesn't happen. Okay, Jefferson and Chase went. That's pretty much the only thing I was worried about. All right, so I'm on the clock here at the 1-5. I'll show you guys the roster spots real quick. We got a 1 quarterback league, 1 tight end. Again, we're doing a pretty bog standard like home league draft here. 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes, 6 bench spots. We're going to go about 14 rounds. So it is a PPR league, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes. You can start up to 4 wide receivers. If I was on the clock here in my home league, I'd be heavily, between 2 players, Bijan Robinson and Tyreek Hill, who are my Bijan is my 4th overall player right now in my rankings, and Tyreek is my 3rd overall player. In my home league specifically, we have points, half points per first downs for running backs, so that kind of sways me a little bit more towards Bijan. But in this format, we're just doing like a bog standard PPR, so I'm going to take Tyreek Hill here at the 1-5.
Yep, I like the pick, and now I'm on the clock here. I'm kind of at the same dilemma where Bijan Robinson and Stephon Diggs are my 2 next highest rated players. You guys would have seen in the wide receiver rankings, I had made reference to the fact that Stephon Diggs was one of my biggest movers up. Actually raised him above Cooper Kupp. He's my 4th overall player, wide receiver 4 off the board. Would be tough in this scenario to pass on a guy like Bijan Robinson, but knowing that I can still, backfill with a guy like Chubb, a guy with like JT, Saquon Barkley, or a guy like Tony Pollard at this spot makes my decision easier. So I will actually select Stephon Diggs, my next highest rated player.
Yeah, I definitely would have went with Bijan there, but I understand the move. I think something that that's a little bit underrated with Diggs is the way that the Bills passing game has the chance, I would say, to take a step backward. I don't think he's a completely safe projection. I know you've pointed to the fact that, when Josh Allen was healthy last year, he was a very good option, but I've also heard Matt Harmon talk about the fact that like Diggs is the most double covered receiver in the NFL. And the fact that, if the Bills offense takes any kind of step back because Diggs doesn't have like a greatest year like he did a couple of years ago, then Diggs could really suffer. And for me, I would take the legendary upside running back in that spot. But I understand the pick still.
Yeah, definitely fair. Again, like if it was Bijan versus Kelsey, Bijan versus obviously Eckler, McCaffrey, whatever, Bijan would have been the pick. It's just Stephon Diggs is a guy I'm way higher on in market. I don't have as many in terms of offensive concerns that Hardman showed there. And realistically, getting another threat in the offense to potentially contribute should affect, Stephon Diggs in terms of his ability to, of course, maybe see some more single coverage. So when we talk about this next pick, though, I mentioned that if Tony Pollard fell back, he would be in heavy consideration, but I did not think that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Garrett Wilson would be facing me right now. So for me, 8th overall pick, Amon-Ra St. Brown is my 11th overall player. So I'm getting him here at 16th overall, 17th overall, give or take. I got to make that pick. So we're going off with a 0 RB to start.
Yeah, I mean, we've broken down underdog drafts. We've broken down some other drafts. I think the key distinction here is, again, we're drafting against computers, but, sometimes there's some tacos in your league that are going to take, Derrick Henry at the 2-3, Patrick Mahomes the 1-12 or whatever. So I do think it's important to remember we're doing this from like a home league perspective. This is not like an analyst draft with a bunch of sharps or whatever. In underdog drafts, you see Amon-Ra St. Brown routinely go near the 1-2 turn. You see, Garrett Wilson, who's on the board for me right now, is like almost never on the board at this point in underdog drafts. So definitely something to keep in mind if you guys are on underdog fantasy doing drafts right now. be aware of like the discrepancies between where the sharps are taking players and then where your casual league mates might be taking players. And also, I mean, this is a full PPR, not even underdogs a half PPR format. So it actually would make more sense that the wide receivers would go higher in this format. But given the home league tendencies of taking your Nick Chubbs, your Derrick Henrys, your Jonathan Taylors to lock down your RB1 spot, we know that that's how home league drafters draft. And we expect that probably to continue for those of you guys that are drafting this August and September. So I'm on the board here. You talked about Tony Pollard. He would be my highest rated running back remaining still on the board. He actually is a tier break for me at running back. And if you guys, of course, want our tiers, you can check them out on Flock Fantasy, or you can go onto Underdog and deposit using code FSC to get our redraft rankings manifesto 2.0 for free. And in our my second tier of running backs, I have Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, and Nick Chubb in that tier. And the other guys are off the board. Tony Pollard's the last remaining one. But I do also have a tier break at wide receiver because Garrett Wilson is in a tier for me with Devontae Adams and with A.J. Brown. So for me, it's all about, do I think I can get a running back here in the third round potentially to anchor out my team? I do really still like the position there with Ramondre and Breece Hall and Josh Jacobs potentially sliding to that point. So I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson with this pick, and hopefully one of those running backs comes back to me. If not, I might be building out a 0 RB or something.
Yeah, I mean, we got the high T truthers there at team 2 and team 4 so far, so I respect that. But you are back at the clock, on the clock right now, and what are you looking at? Because those running backs that you just made reference to all pretty much went.
Yeah, literally all of them went, and I'm still glad I went with Wilson. I think in a PPR format, he has a cleaner projection than Tony Pollard, so I still think I make that pick 9 times out of 10. But I might be in a spot here where I'm looking to build out a bit of a 0 RB shell. And again, 0 RB, for those of you guys that are maybe casual fantasy players and you have like a sour taste in your mouth when you hear the term 0 RB, the reason that you execute a 0 RB strategy is because your league mates force you to, right? Like by running backs going off the board a lot higher than you're willing to take them, it kind of forces you to zig while the rest of your league is zagging. You don't want to go into a redraft league with the intention of going 0 RB. It's something that you keep in your back pocket as a potential strategy to pivot to if, like on in my situation, Tyreek Hill and Garrett Wilson were my best players on the board, in my opinion. So I have to then pivot away maybe and go towards more of a 0 RB type of format. And again, the best available players for me, Mark Andrews goes off the board. The top 3 quarterbacks are all off the board. My best available position is, again, wide receiver. So I'm probably going to grab between T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, and some of these other guys available. Calvin Ridley is actually my next rated player. So he is actually going to be the player that I go with, even though Danny, I'm sure, wanted him. I could have gone with, the ADP bro pick and take T. Higgins or Devontae Smith. But I believe that Calvin Ridley has a 20-point per game ceiling. And I don't think, minus an injury to the wide receivers ahead of those two on the depth chart, that Devontae Smith and T. Higgins have that kind of ceiling. So starting off my draft with 3 wide receivers who I can legitimately say have league-breaking upside is something that I'm really happy to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you mentioned that point where people just assume if you're drafting 0 RB that you're going into a draft and saying, ew, to the running backs. I'm like a higher class than you. I can just take wide receivers and be fine. People build up these narratives in their head when in actuality, I'm just looking at the fact that Stephon Diggs at the 108. Pretty simple there. You're getting a potential 160, 170 target player that's going to be insulated to Josh Allen in the top 5 offense. Easy pick for me. Amon St. Brown, another player that last year when he was fully healthy was averaging over 10 targets per game. If I'm getting 360 targets within my first 2 picks, that's going to be more valuable than maybe getting a guy who can finish as the RB6 next year. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm getting that PPR upside. You did the same thing, obviously, with Tyreek, Garrett Wilson, and Calvin Ridley, but I am on the clock here. And the guys I would be between would be T. Higgins for me, Lamar Jackson if I want to go the quarterback route, or if I want to go running back, my highest rated player would be Travis Etienne. Now, the question is, if I pass on Etienne now, is there a chance that Jahmyr Gibbs would make it back? Because, I mean, looking at the board at running back, we're kind of getting a little bit ugly right now after those 2, in my opinion, go off the board. So do I want to get my anchor here with Travis Etienne, or do I want to potentially take T. Higgins, wait to see if, Etienne or Lamar Jackson gets back? You know what? I will go with T. Higgins because worst case scenario, I can default to getting Joe Burrow and I can stack them up.
Yeah, I mean, he just went there. Hopefully you do get a running back to fall back to you. Both Etienne and Walker go, then Mixon goes, then Gibbs goes. Again, the high T, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs team. There's going to be people in your guys' home leagues that are very high on running backs, right? So you definitely need to keep these strategies in the back of your mind. Sometimes people won't draft strictly off the sleeper ADP, or maybe if you guys are in a little bit more sharper home leagues, like I would say my home league is. They're not totally obsessed with running backs the way they used to. They've kind of learned that in a full PPR format that the wide receiver position has a lot of value. So you're back on the clock. Lamar did fall to you, which I'm assuming is the player you're going to go with.
Which is beautiful. Again, like I mentioned at the previous pick, I was going to take T. Higgins because he was my highest player on the board, but I was praying one of Burrow, ETN, Gibbs, or Lamar Jackson make it back. Lamar Jackson should not be a player going in the 4th round. He's got every bit the upside that Jalen Hurts has, and Jalen Hurts is going at the 212.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually on the board here, and again, like the running back position kind of just is not breaking my way right now. Like I also was hoping, one of ETN, Gibbs, Walker, somebody like that would fall back to me. I don't really love reaching into the dead zone for running backs, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it for younger guys that have a lot of upside like ETN, Gibbs, and Walker do. So I'm on the board here. Again, the running back position, Aaron Jones, I like J.K. Dobbins, don't get me wrong, but I think this is a smidge early for him. I would rather get him in round 5. The best available players for me, again, are still wide receivers and actually George Kittle as well. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm not deviating for an elite quarterback here, I think I'm actually going to go with Kittle and grab myself. Currently, we did our tight end rankings earlier this week. I have George Kittle ranked as my tight end 3. As it currently stands, a lot of people in the comment section were like, how could you rank him over TJ Hawkinson? TJ Hawkinson has the higher target upside. And I definitely agree with that sentiment, but I do love being attached to high level offenses. And I think my first 4 picks, you can make the argument that those are going to be 4 of the top 10 offenses in the NFL with the Jets, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, and the 49ers. So I think, I don't know about you, but when I draft a redraft team and I look at the offenses that my players are attached to, and they're all players on bad offenses, it turns my stomach a little bit. I like getting players who are all talented, who all project to be on good offenses, especially in home leagues where people, I would say, weight that stuff more when it comes to trading. Like nobody wants to trade for, Terry McLaurin in a home league. Everybody wants to trade for, even if they're a number 2 receiver, like a Devontae Smith, who's attached to a great offense. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you guys are drafting. At least that's been my experience in my own home league, is that people are very much drawn to the fact that you want good players and good offenses. And speaking to that point, it's really tempting, I'm not going to lie, to take Trevor Lawrence here because I have Calvin Ridley, but I do have an out in the fact that I have a bit of a tier break at wide receiver, which is Amari Cooper. So I'm not going to reach for the correlation there of going with the Jag stack. I'm going to take Amari Cooper here, and it also gives me a possibility that if Deshaun Watson falls back to me in round 6, I can grab him if Trevor Lawrence is not off the board. And we see 2 taco picks in a row there with team 6, stacking up his gross running back core of Najee Harris and James Conner. James Conner on Underdog is a guy that goes in round 8, round 9, where the sharps are drafting. But in more casual redraft leagues, you're going to see guys like James Conner and Dalvin Cook and Miles Sanders and Aaron Jones. Like these guys are going to make up the RB dead zone in round 4, round 5.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the RB dead zone, we are well within it. We just saw Dalvin Cook go off the board. Give me a fucking break. Yeah, no, that is disgusting. I could take a wide receiver here. I do like a lot of the wide receivers on the board, however, and whereas when I look at tight end, I like Kyle Pitts a good amount over the rest of the board. And a 5.8 opportunity cost, we're looking at that. What's that 56th, 57th overall pick? That's about where I have him aligned in my rankings. I understand that you could probably get him cheaper on Underdog Fantasy. He's usually a round 6, round 7 turn type of guy. But in a more home league format, I don't mind going out securing Kyle Pitts because obviously, again, I do view a tier break.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Lawrence actually went off the board, which is making me sad because I thought there was a half chance that he could have fallen back to me, knowing that you have a quarterback, the team 7 has a quarterback, team 10 has a quarterback, team 12 has a quarterback. I thought there was a chance he might slide back to me. So what are you looking at here?
Yeah, I'm stuck between 2 guys. For me personally, it would be between Drake London. It would be between Mike Williams for me. Full PPR, 2nd-year profile. I did just take Pitts though, so that would actually be the tiebreaker for me. I'm just gonna go with Mike Williams.
Yeah, I think an underrated part about building out a 0 RB or just having like the ability to start a lot of wide receivers in general in a format like this where we have 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes, having a guy like Mike Williams as your second flex, the guy that can give you a high weekly ceiling, a guy that has the ability, especially with Kellen Moore now coming into that situation, to stretch the field. And Justin Herbert, we expect him to check down less in Kellen Moore's system, probably push the ball a little bit further downfield. So again, I'm actually back on the clock here. You didn't take Drake London. I'm definitely considering him. I actually think Brandon Ayuk is my highest rated wide receiver, but him and Drake London are close. And similar to what you did, I already have George Kittle. Do I want to stack up too many 49ers? Probably not. So I'm going to actually grab Drake London here. And I'm sure some of you guys might be absolutely screaming at your monitor right now. I already have 4 wide receivers. I can't start any more wide receivers. Why not take a running back? I have none of them right now, right? I don't have a running back on my team. But when you're building out a zero RB, your goal, according to Sean Siegel and a lot of guys that have done research on this topic, is to win your flexes. Right, you're trying to have the best flexes no matter what, and having a 3 stack of Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, and Drake London to play matchups between and work into the flex is definitely something that I'm wanting to do with this team. So I could go quarterback, but I do think Watson's going to fall back to me. So that's why I'm not going quarterback, because 2 of the teams already have one. So I'm going to grab the best available player for me. And again, there's the people always get wrapped up too. It's like, oh, you don't have any running backs. You can't start a good starting roster. You can always make trades. You can always go after different players. If Drake London is having a breakout season on my bench and I can't get him into my lineup because the rest of my receivers are so great, then I can trade him for maybe Jahmyr Gibbs is having a down start to his career because he's a rookie running back or whatever. At the midpoint of the season. So I'm going to grab Drake London here. Probably not going to invest too much more in wide receiver because I am quite strong there now. But I'm not reaching for a Rashad White in the 6th round just because I need a running back. And now we're also seeing a big run of wide receivers go off the board. And I'm so stacked at that position that's great news for me, because Deshaun Watson does fall back to me. I am intrigued, I'm not going to lie, by Javonte Williams, because he has the ability to really return on his ADP of all the running backs remaining on the board. Do I want to grab Watson or do I want to grab Javonte? This is really hard, because I think Watson represents a tier break for me at quarterback. I think Javonte represents a tier break for me at running back. I think, knowing the nature of the running back landscape, I'm going to take Javonte Williams, because I think he has the ability, like I said, he's hitting all the checkpoints. Normally, do we want to draft running backs coming off of torn ACLs? No, we don't. But if a guy's going to break the checkpoints and overachieve relative to expectations, it's usually a young running back who's still in their prime, had good draft capital, good team investment. He's in a good offensive system now with Sean Payton. So I'm going to grab Javonte Williams as my first upside swing at running back. And, spoiler alert, most of my remaining picks are going to be running backs, I'm sure, as are yours. Once we fill out our flex spots and, quarterback spots and stuff, we're just going to take absolute dart throws, city on this position.
Yeah, 100%. I obviously wanted Javonte to fall there for more of an upside play, but I do think David Montgomery at this point represents a solid value. He's typically a guy in terms of his profile that you would see go off the board in the 5th round of years past, and we would classify him. He's a dead zone running back. We're not targeting him, but once we get to the 7-8, we're leaving behind last year a very valuable role that Jamal Williams had on that Detroit team inside the 5 type of usage, red zone type of usage. And I think Dave Montgomery is a much more talented running back than what Jamal Williams represented. Of course, we're expecting Jahmyr Gibbs to have a bigger share of the backfield than what DeAndre Swift represented last year. But even if David Montgomery returns 80% of the pure value touches that Jamal Williams got, I think that's still going to get supplemented more with more receiving work and more efficiency as a whole. Because like I said, I think he's a more talented player. I was hoping that Antonio Gibson did fall back to me, unfortunately. I would have loved to get him, paired him with David Montgomery there. But if I'm looking at the board, I don't mind a guy like Brian Robinson either. But I kind of see this tier at running back pretty similarly. Whereas at wide receiver, I'm looking at Jahan Dotson and Quentin Johnston. I have Mike Williams, so that's actually another tiebreaker. I'll just go with Jahan Dotson. I was going to say I wanted Quentin Johnston for the late season push upside, but given the fact that I have Mike Williams, it made the tier break type of, or the tier decision a lot easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I got an absolute gift that Watson actually did fall back to me, even though I was going to take him at 7-5. So that's a pretty easy pick. Now, I mean, the way I look at my team here is, I think a lot of people, casual fantasy players, will look at their team and they're like, I want to fill up my running back core. I want to fill up my wide receiver core, fill up my quarterback core, fill up my tight end core, and then I'll worry about my flexes later. The way that we have structured our teams is that we're going to have a strong tight end. We both have a strong tight end. We both have a strong quarterback. Yours is, stronger than mine, but I still think mine has upside to be a great QB this year. And then my wide receiver slots and my flex spots are basically going to carry my team for the most part. Tyreek, Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, and Drake London. All of those guys have the ability to put up, 18, 19, 20 points per game, all 5 of them. And then with Javonte Williams, I'm getting a real upside swing at running back. I'll probably draft some safer guys that I could use early on, potentially in the season later. But I'm pretty happy with this team. Neither of us intended to go 0 RB here. This is just the nature of the draft board, the way that the tier breaks kind of fell to us. But I'm going to pretty much hammer out a bunch of running backs at this point in the draft. So I grabbed my upside swing there with Javonte Williams. I do see another absolutely elite upside swing on the board right now in Zach Charbonnet. But I also really like Rashad Penny's ability to kind of, without injury, work into his backfield and become the starting back there. Not to mention, I mean, his backfield mate is DeAndre Swift, who's dealt with a lot of injuries himself. So I'm going to take Rashad Penny here at the 9-5, get myself some early volume. Me and Danny are probably going to be fighting for running backs the rest of the draft now, which is going to be funny. But yeah, I like this. Once you get in this area of the draft, the wide receiver position, yeah, I like Zay Flowers. I like Elijah Moore. I like Cortland Sutton. I like Odell Beckham Jr. Those guys don't project nearly as well as the wide receivers that we already have on our team. And because we invested so heavily in that position, it doesn't make a ton of sense for us to just continue pounding wide receivers at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we got them at good opportunity cost compared to the running backs on the board. And now we're kind of backfilling for potential RB2s. Because again, if you have wide receiver 1 potential players in your flexes, or at least top 15 guys for the matter of T. Higgins and Mike Williams in your flexes every week, it makes needing that elite running back 1 less apparent. Because if you have, 2 running backs that can give you 13 to 15 PPR points per game, and your wide receiver group as a whole, you're starting 4 of them, and they're giving you a combined 65 PPR points a week. Well, if you're doing the math there and you're getting, let's say, 25 from your running backs and 65 from your wide receivers, you're already getting 90 points. And then combining that with the fact that Lamar Jackson's probably going to be averaging about 20 plus, 23 plus points per game. Kyle Pitts can be a 10 plus, 13 plus PPR point per game tight end. Once you do the math overall, you realize like this team has a lot of upside because of how strong the flexes actually are. People don't actually account for how good you can make your flex spots. And with that being said, my next highest rated running back and a guy that I think can return running back to value is going to be Khalil Herbert. For all accounts, with the Bears right now, he has been treated as the first team running back over there in Chicago. And worst case scenario, I do think this is going to be a committee. I think Roschon Johnson can work in between the tackles, but I think Khalil Herbert has shown from an efficiency standpoint in the past that he can handle being the team's main cut running back 1, at least to start the year. I do think, like I said, Roschon might work in, especially once you get to week 7, week 8. But for me, I just kind of have to figure out my running backs for the first few weeks, because by week 4, week 5, your Elijah Mitchell off the waiver wire, your insert James Robinson off the waiver wire. They typically materialize within the first few weeks. So if I can figure out my point situation at running back within the first few weeks and then be able to, max bid on one of those potential RB2s that should be available on the waiver wire, that's going to be my best effort. So somebody might argue, oh, why don't you take Samaje Perine? I just think he's a fodder running back. And I do think you took Javonte Williams in the 7th. We both believe that he will be back sooner rather than later. Whereas a guy like Khalil Herbert has shown efficiency and has the opportunity, like I said, in the biggest backfield to be that leading back. So I will snag him here, 9th round player. I actually do like that cost.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about running a 0 RB or just being fragile at running back in general is that the majority of your waiver wire budget in season is dedicated to churning your bench and getting running back opportunity, because you're so strong at tight end. You don't need to waste money on streaming tight ends. You're so strong at quarterback, presumably that Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson are both elite quarterbacks. You don't need to spend waiver budget trying to stream the quarterback position or anything. Your goal basically is just to make sure that you can catch up as the season goes along, as some of your league mates that overinvested in the running back position start to suffer injuries. You can pick up their backups and, replace their point production that way. And inherently that your team is going to get stronger as the season goes along because you're so strong at wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end, the positions that do not get injured as frequently as running back. So you're going to have a pretty good leg up there. We didn't intend to make this a 0 RB video, but both of us are literally doing a 0 RB. So we're going to talk a lot of 0 RB draft strategy. And of course, we're going to do more mock drafts, so don't worry about that. We'll talk about other strategies going forward, but definitely something that we're seeing materialize here. Who are you going with on the clock?
Yeah, so that's quickly what I was going to say as well. In terms of the 0 RB versus, a heavier RB strategy, the way we kind of looked at it and the way we've taught it in the past is that wide receiver is a talent-based position. You can get all the snaps in the world. And of course, to a certain degree in your fantasy drafts, once you're in the double-digit rounds, you just want guys that can be on the field. But the top elite distinguishers at wide receiver have 2 things in common. They get those snaps and they make the most of those snaps. They earn targets. They are efficient players. They're paid according to their team in terms of the value that they bring. It is easier to spot an elite talent at wide receiver, in my opinion, than an elite talent at running back. The thing with running back is that the reason why they have so much fantasy upside is they're getting upwards of 300, 350 plus touches. Well, and these days, there's only about, 4 or 5 of those guys a year that realistically get that level of work. And the other guys, for the most part, are part of committee backfields. They're way more frequent to go down. And like we kind of said, early portion of the year, once we're on the waiver wire, the reason why we love these running backs that are on the waiver wire in week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 is that it's an opportunity-based position, like I said. So therefore, although they're a less talented option than the running back that was ahead of them in the depth chart, they can still churn fantasy points, because at the end of the day, if they're getting 20 opportunities in a week and they're giving you 90 yards from scrimmage and like 4 catches, just because they're less talented on paper than the guy ahead of them doesn't really matter when it comes to their fantasy point bottom line. So for me here, I'm actually going to take, speaking of a running back, going to take an upside shot on one. I really like the fit of Devon Achane in Miami. By all accounts, it does look like Dalvin Cook has kind of moved off the Dolphins, kind of shifted his gears towards potentially going to the Jets. And if they do not bring in a veteran running back, and the core going into the season for Miami is between Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson, I really like the upside there of Devon Achane working in that McDaniel scheme.
Yeah, I think the last point that I want to make on the running back position too is like on a weekly rankings basis, like, you know, year over year, we're going to have guys that we rank inside the top 20 running backs on any given year. I would say at wide receiver, there's probably like 30 different wide receivers that work into our top 20 rankings on any given week. But at running back, there's probably 45, 50 different running backs that work into our top 20 rankings on any given week, because like you said, there's going to be games where, you know, Jonathan Taylor misses a game and, you know, Deion Jackson or whatever his name was behind him on the depth chart is going to work in for 1 week as like an RB2 and that kind of thing. So that's what we're looking for when we build out these cores. And the other thing too is when you're building out late round running backs, you also want to mix in a different type of archetype. So what you did, you grabbed 2 guys that are projected for decent workloads, Montgomery and Herbert. Then you grab your upside swing with Devon Achane. I grabbed my upside swing first, but he also projects for a decent workload in Javonte Williams. And then I grabbed the guy who's a little bit safer, I think, in Rashad Penny. I am going to grab a guy who I do think is a little bit more of an upside swing, even though he has profiled recently as a safe guy, in Damian Harris for the Buffalo Bills. I think he has the possibility. I'm not a huge James Cook guy. And I think when you're iffy on a backfield, it's best to default to I'm just going to take the cheapest option. And in my opinion, Damian Harris is the cheapest option in the backfield. And he also has the highest upside for, you know, touchdown scoring opportunities, because maybe James Cook works in as like a 70 target running back, and that could definitely make him valuable. But I do love the ability in the offense that Damian Harris plays in to have the potential to punch in, you know, 10 plus touchdowns on the ground, which he did 2 years ago. Like before Ramondre took over that backfield, Damian Harris had like a 15 touchdown season.
Yeah, no, I fully agree there. But you are back on the clock here. We see 1 running back go between your pick, Jerick McKinnon off the board. We see 3 tight ends go off the board, including Chigakonkwo and Cole Kmet, maybe a little bit surprising picks. But you're on the clock. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, again, so we're going to build out like more running back depth. We're just like, I'm going to, you know, peruse over the wide receiver position, see if there's anything I really like there. I do see some guys later on that I feel like I could maybe take one more dart throw on. At tight end, I'm not going to draft another tight end because I have George Kittle. At quarterback, probably not going to draft another quarterback because I have Deshaun Watson. For me on the board right now, I'm looking to mix in another upside swing between Elijah Mitchell, Tyler Algier, Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, and Roschon Johnson. All those guys kind of fit the description of what I'm looking for. My highest rated player is Roschon Johnson. Of those guys, I'm probably not going to take him because he's so buried in ADP that I think I can get him in round 12. Danny's squinting right now and grimacing because he knows I'm going to take Elijah Mitchell most likely. I am going to take Elijah Mitchell because, I mean, we saw when Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell were on the field together that Elijah Mitchell was working in on the goal line. He was working in on early downs. Christian McCaffrey's 27 years old. He's got a number of touches under his belt. I think the 49ers are comfortable running a committee. We've seen that in recent years. And just because they have Christian McCaffrey doesn't mean they're going to get away from that philosophy. And we know Elijah Mitchell can be efficient on limited touches. So when you're running a 0 RB, when you don't have like the best running backs in your league, you're trying to find any opportunities that you can catch up to your league mates. And if Christian McCaffrey were to go down, which is a reasonable possibility, given his injury history, given his advanced age and touch workload, it's possible that Elijah Mitchell could work into, even if it's only like 4 or 5 games of like RB1, high-end RB2 type of production. That's definitely worth it in the 12th round.
Yeah, I agree. That one hurt quite a bit because, I mean, if you guys are watching this mock draft this past week, I believe on Saturday, you guys would have seen it. I actually dropped players we can't stop drafting over with Ron Stewart on the channel. And Elijah Mitchell is one of my favorite dart throws in drafts right now. Oddly enough, I took Devon Achane to play the ADP game, knowing that Elijah Mitchell was lower in sleeper ADP, hoping that I can get both. Because with Elijah Mitchell, like you kind of said, he had that standalone value, and he's got probably the best insulated situation. If CMC were to go down, Elijah Mitchell would be a back everybody ranks within the running back one range, given the touchdown opportunity, given the efficiency between the tackles he's shown in the past. Not to mention when he shared the field with Christian McCaffrey last year in the games they played together, Elijah Mitchell had 12 red zone touches. Christian McCaffrey had 11. I don't expect that to be, a majority split for Elijah Mitchell moving forward, but if he's contributing, let's say, 2 or 3 red zone touches a game when Christian McCaffrey's active, could you imagine the fact that if he were to go down, this would be a back that could potentially get 6, 7, 8 red zone touches if they play, let's say, the Cardinals in a week?
Yeah, dude, I think it's possibility that, like, everybody's looking for this year's Jamal Williams. A lot of people point to Rashad Penny and Damian Harris as guys that play in great offenses that could punch in a lot of touchdowns. Wouldn't it be at all shocking to us if Elijah Mitchell punched in 10 rushing touchdowns next year as, potentially the early down goal line back of this offense, because the 49ers know how Christian McCaffrey needs to be used and it's in space as a receiver. It wouldn't shock me if they used more of a two-back system than people are anticipating. So you're back on the clock here. What are you thinking with Mitchell gone?
Yeah, so my next player that I want from a both standalone potential upside pick would be Kendre Miller, day 2 running back, has the opportunity to work into New Orleans. Obviously, we know the situation with Alvin Kamara. We don't know if he's going to get suspended. We don't know what's going on there. And Jamal Williams, yes, he should potentially be that vet that works ahead of him in the back on the depth chart. But if you were to tell me right now that Alvin Kamara missed 4 or 5 games to start the year, and I'm only worried about Jamal Williams working ahead of an 11th round rookie running back at this point, I'm going to take him every single time. So I like Kendre Miller there. Bigger running back, has a 3-down type of skill set that can contribute to this offense, especially if Alvin Kamara is out, more so than what Jamal Williams has shown. Typically, I want to run up to the podium right now and take Tank Bigsby, but Sky Moore going in the 12th round right now is way too much of a value to pass on. So for me personally, although I'm stacked at wide receiver, like if Sky Moore ends up materializing into being the wide receiver 1 for Patrick Mahomes, a guy who's going consistently in the 8th round of underdog drafts, getting him 4 rounds at a discount is mighty fine in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, when you're this stacked at wide receiver like we are, the only deviations you're really going to make are for upside swings and a guy that has the potential to be the starting slot receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, a role that saw Juju Smith-Schuster, get a lot of volume. He wasn't really that efficient on it, but he did see quite a bit of volume there. So I played the ADP game and it did end up working out for me. So I'm going to take Roschon Johnson with this pick. Again, the running back core that I'm building out, and even if I was like heavy at running back early, even if I had taken Bijan Robinson in the 1st round and built out like a hero RB or something, I would still be doing what I'm doing now, which is taking a bunch of dart throws on the running back position. Because simply put, the wide receivers this late in the draft, if they're not rookies, if they're not young players like Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, Jonathan Mingo types, they're just honestly they're not going to hit at a very high rate. Tyler Boyd, Rondale Moore, Darnell Mooney. Those type of guys, they're fine if you guys need depth and that kind of thing, but they're not going to, really move the needle as far as you winning your league. The guys that are going to win your leagues are, taking shots on ambiguous backfields like Roschon Johnson. He has the ability to become this year's Tyler Algier, this year's Damian Pierce, this year's whoever. And, same goes for handcuff types like Elijah Mitchell. Same goes for another ambiguous backfield situation with Rashad Penny and Damian Harris. I feel pretty confident that I know my wide receivers are going to perform on a given week. I know George Kittle is going to perform on a given week. I know, or at least I expect Deshaun Watson to bounce back this year. Between Javonte Williams, Penny, Damian Harris, Elijah Mitchell, and Roschon Johnson, I should be able to figure my running back positions out and play the guys that project for the most volume. And, if some of these guys don't work out and they don't materialize, I can always cut bait with them and start working the waiver wire. So I am going to deviate again here, though, just like you did for Sky Moore. I believe there is a nice upside swing on the board in Nico Collins, a guy that I think has a chance to become the highest target earning wide receiver for his team. He actually did kind of showcase that role last year with the Texans, and CJ Stroud looks like he's performing pretty well in camp. Looks like he's the type of quarterback that can get the ball to his playmakers at the very least. And I think Nico Collins projects as his best receiver. So I'll take Nico Collins here.
Yep, and I'm back on the clock here, and you guys can see, of course, on my team thus far, I have 2 rookie running backs, and I will be adding to that group now with another rookie running back. Give me Chase Brown from the Cincinnati Bengals. Only Joe Mixon really ahead of him on the depth chart as is right now, and realistically, if you're dealing in this portion of the draft, like you kind of mentioned, you're shooting for upside. If Joe Mixon were to miss time, or if Joe Mixon were to get benched because he's an inefficient player, you're getting potentially Chase Brown, who has shown as a prospect. I mean, obviously, you did your deep dive on every single one of the running back prospects. You pointed out the fact that he is one of the best, complete backs of this draft. If you need him to catch the ball, he can catch the ball. You need him to run between the tackles, he can run between the tackles. He's a tough, hard-nosed guy that can earn those hard yards when he needs to. realistically, that's all a coaching staff needs to see from their backup running back. If Joe Mixon were to miss time and Chase Brown were to step in, show all those traits to Cincinnati, he can legitimately be, I don't want to say like a 20-plus opportunity per game guy, but if Joe Mixon missed time and he was getting 16, 18 opportunities per game on a Cincinnati loaded offense, he has the opportunity to punch in a touchdown per game. So I will take that there. And I will also take another rookie running back simply because I like the value here. He's behind a 29-year-old downhill 245-pound running back on his depth chart, and he has the ability on what could be a potentially bad Titans offense to contribute in some garbage time type of situation, to contribute out of the backfield. So I do like Tajay Spears here in the 14th round. So wrapped up my running back core basically with what is that 6 of my last 8 picks, just spending pure at running back.
Yeah, I mean, I want my my running back bench spots to just be all green. Just want all the running backs on my bench, because that's the upside swings that we're looking to take. Speaking of which, I'm going to take another running back to close on my draft. A guy. I mean, we don't know what the situation is with J.K. Dobbins. We don't know if he's holding out. We don't know if he's holding in. We don't know if he's healthy. They're talking about the fact that his knee procedure is not 100%. What I do know is that Gus Edwards would benefit a lot from anything J.K. Dobbins related, keeping him off the field. And Gus Edwards, by the way, has averaged over 5 yards per carry over the course of his career. Only like Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones of like active running backs have done that. And this system is one that, we've often talked about pretty much any running back being successful in. So if anybody gets volume in this offense that's not named J.K. Dobbins, it's most likely Gus Edwards. Miss me with Melvin Gordon. He's absolutely dust. Miss me with, the undrafted running backs they've had and those type of guys. Gus Edwards, if Dobbins were to be out of the lineup, would be the primary early down guy. And again, I'm very confident that I can piece together RB2 production out of my top guys. If Javonte Williams hits, he's obviously going to be my best running back. But if he doesn't hit, I can work in, Penny and Damian Harris early on in the season, or I can work in, Gus Edwards maybe and Penny early on in the season if Dobbins is holding out. And then I can, continue to cycle my waiver wire, wait for Roschon Johnson to maybe take over his backfield, wait for, Christian McCaffrey injury, hold him on my bench. So yeah, a lot of upside at running back, a lot of running back talk in this video in general. I would say when we look at the board, the reason we went with 0 RBs, again, if you guys are skipping ahead in this video, is because the running back position went so highly valued off the board. Eckler and McCaffrey were both top 4 picks. Neither of us have them ranked that high. Bijan, I haven't ranked that high, but Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, those guys go a little bit ahead of where I have them ranked. Same goes, Tony Pollard went about where I have him ranked, but Josh Jacobs goes at the end of the second round. Breece Hall goes in the early third round. Ramondre Stevenson, all the running backs went off the board, especially when we get to the dead zone with Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, Isaiah Pacheco, Rashad White, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, like Joe Mixon. Those guys are all going way ahead of where I have them ranked. The wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends presented better values for us, hence why I went with George Kittle and Deshaun Watson. And, Ridley Wilson, Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Drake London, all those guys to me came at very good value. And this is also part of the reason you want to be drafting on Underdog Fantasy as well, because you can see what happens in sharp draft rooms with people who have money on the line. It's a $3 million to first, $15 million.
$25 buy-in.
$25 buy-in. There's no tacos drafted in this format. It's all sharp players who are like max entering this tournament, and the ADP reflects that. So you can recognize by doing a bunch of underdog drafts, you can recognize who's coming at a good value in your home league. And also, of course, if you sign up on Underdog using the promo code FSE, you'll get a free deposit match. So if you put in $50, you'll get a free $50 on the site to use. And also by depositing just $10 minimum, you'll get access to our redraft rankings manifesto. You'll get access to our weekly rankings throughout the season to help you out with start sit decisions. Danny, I'll let you talk about your team and then we'll sign out of here.
Yeah, so the only main deviation you could possibly point to that I'd probably prefer in this area is, although I do have Stephon Diggs ranked higher than Bijan, they are within a couple picks of each other. I think I have Diggs 4th overall, Bijan 6th overall. And maybe in hindsight, looking at the potential nature of this room, you want to take your anchor there because, again, a guy like Najee Harris going in the middle of the 3rd round, a guy like Joe Mixon's going at the beginning of the 4th. Like, all these guys are kind of pushed up the board, whereas Bijan Robinson, I already had him at 6th overall. He's already going at 9th, so that's technically a value on my own chart. So that's the only potential deviation I would say is maybe in a more home league setting, because the running backs are going to go higher, you go Bijan instead of Diggs. But everywhere else, I just felt like I scooped value across the board. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy I have, like I said, 11th overall, get him in the middle of the 2nd round. T. Higgins, a guy who I think is, a mid-3rd round pick, got about appropriate value there. I believe I have him 27th overall. He falls to me at, that would be about 30th. So like that value there. Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, should be a 3rd round pick, goes off the board 4-5. Kyle Pitts got about aligned where I have him ranked. And a guy like Mike Williams, I think, should be probably a 4th or 5th round pick. So getting him at that 6'5" is very nice. And then, of course, from there on, just basically filled out my running back core.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about if you guys play on Sleeper, if you guys play on Yahoo, if you guys play on ESPN, we'll talk about the biggest values in the ADPs of our rankings versus those sites, so that if you are playing on those sites, you can recognize, like I've noticed that Mike Williams goes later on Sleeper than he does on Underdog and other sites and other platforms like that. So Mike Williams, if you guys play on Sleeper, should definitely be on your radar as a guy that is going to probably slide to like the 5th, 6th round, when on Underdog, he's like a 4th, 5th round pick. Some of that's due to stacking reasons because people stack him up with Justin Herbert, but I do still think even if you're not stacking him with Justin Herbert, he should be a 5th round pick, and getting him at the 6'5" there is definitely a pretty good value for you. So like I said, if you guys are interested in our rankings, you can get them by depositing on Underdog using just $10, weekly rankings and redraft rankings manifesto. That will help you completely for your home league drafts. You can see where we have players ranked, tiers, positional rankings, our rankings versus consensus ADP versus Underdog ADP versus ECR. Like I said, we'll also have, team stats from last year to see how they performed. Danny's The Truth series will also show, if you guys were curious, how did Stephon Diggs perform in games where Josh Allen was on the field last year? You'll be able to see that in the Redraft Rankings Manifesto 2.0, and you can get that, like I said, either on the site, flockfantasy.com, or depositing on Underdog. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.